Welcome everybody to today's fireside chat, Building Trust, Unleashing Potential, delivering an R&D tax service your clients can depend on. I'd like to kick off by introducing our panel. Mike Dean, MD, Jen Badger, Ops Director and R&D Tax Authority, both co-founders of WhisperClaims and both strongly committed to raising standards within the R&D tax space and to support as many accountants as possible to deliver robust and dependable R&D tax services to their customers. And we are delighted today to have one of our fantastic customers, Jennie Gillam, founder of Redfish Accountancy and co-founder of FreshPay, to offer up her own experience of setting up an in-house R&D tax service supported by WhisperClaims and share with you all the valuable insights she's gained during her journey so far. Okay, so before we get going, just a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. We'll be running a couple of polls and posting several links during the session to resources. So do keep your eye on the chat box and don't worry, we'll let you know when they're coming. We do have a Q&A later on, so please do feel free to fire over your questions as soon as you like. But please can I ask that you pop any questions in the Q&A box so they don't get missed with all the chatter that's going on in the chat box. Hope everybody's got that. So for a quick rundown of how today is going to go, we'll do some initial intros. The panel will then have a chat about the changing landscape in the R&D tax space. We'll hear from Jennie and Jen about their experiences and then over to the Q&A. So for anybody who is new to WhisperClaims, we are really delighted to have you here today. We're passionate about empowering our community with the confidence to implement or scale their own in-house R&D tax service. Having the right foundations in place is key, and fundamental to this is a strong, reliable and consistent process. Our technology has been designed by R&D tax experts to offer you this straight out of the box. And coupled with this is our easy to access advice line support channels and educational tools, so you can focus on adding even more value to your client relationships, protecting your clients from the bad actors that HMRC are trying to weed out of the sector, and also have the potential to generate a new revenue stream from your existing client base. Jennie, would you like to tell us a bit more about you and your firm Redfish Accountancy?
Sure, thanks, Suze. I founded Redfish Accountancy over 20 years ago. We're based in Sussex. I've got 10 people working for me, and we do sort of the whole outsourced finance function, as well as all the regular accountancy practice work that we do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jennie. Thanks, Suze. We're going to kick off, before we get into a discussion, we're going to kick off with a poll just to get to know a little bit about our audience, given that we've just shared a little bit about ourselves. So just bear with me while I get this poll up and running. So I just want to ask everyone in the audience, how do your clients access the R&D tax scheme? So are any of you doing a direct in-house delivery? Are you proactively outsourcing to specialists, or are you just leaving your clients to do their own thing, or even a mixture of the above, if that's appropriate? So we'll just leave that running for a few seconds to get some responses there. Thank you very much for those who've done that already. And Jennie, I'm intrigued with this question. It might be interesting just to know, where were you on that when you first approached us?
Well, our clients used specialist R&D consultants to do their R&D claims when they had them. Yeah, we were a little bit nervous about doing them at first. We hadn't had any experience. I think that's the problem, is very hard to get R&D experience. And so although we had some knowledge, because we had some clients who were using the R&D tax credit scheme already, WhisperClaims really helped us with, one, the confidence to do it, to prepare a good report, and also with your training that you provide, really helped us give us the confidence to start doing that ourselves.
You say that clients were using third parties, but that wasn't because you'd outsourced. That was just they were already using those.
They were
people.
already using them, and they were asking us, we would get clients come to us and say, well, do you do R&D? And we'd say, well, not really, but I'm sure we could find somebody to do it for you if you haven't already got someone. And then we had clients who were using the tax consultants and saying, can't you do it? We'd much rather it was done in-house with you. We have quite a good culture. We have, and our clients all sort of go along with our culture. So they'd rather use us for everything rather than using a different firm who doesn't know their business inside out like we do.
Yeah, cool. Well, we've got a few responses in from the poll. I'll just see if we can share the results of that. So we've got just about a majority of people are actually delivering already in-house. So that's interesting to see. And then a bunch who are doing that proactive outsource, and only one in the same boat as you, it looks like. So leaving clients to do their own thing. That's probably, thinking about the people who tend to approach us, that's probably a fair assessment of the mix. We get a lot of people who come and talk to WhisperClaims because they're looking for improvements to efficiency in existing in-house processes, versus those people who are looking to stop outsourcing and bring the process in-house. So that's fascinating to see. Let me just clear that off the screen. Hopefully that's disappeared for everybody. Right, so to kick us off, we're probably all aware on this call that there's been a sort of tumultuous last 12 months in R&D tax. Lots of changes from HMRC, changes in legislation, impact of House of Lords inquiries, etc. So, Jen, can I ask you to just kind of give us an overview of those changes that have been impacting the market in the last 12 months or so?
Yep. I'll let Suze move the slide forward.
Sorry, Jen.
Thanks, Suze. That's okay. So as Mike said, there's been huge changes in all kind of aspects and areas of R&D tax relief over the last 12 months. So to take the kind of legislative HMRC side, or legislative governmental side of this, obviously the biggest change that's come in recently has been the enhancement rates. So this was announced at the autumn budget and obviously came into force on the 1st of April. So enhancement rates for SMEs have decreased from 130% to 86%, and the audit rate has increased from 13% to 20%. They've also reduced the SME tax credit rate from 14.5% to 10%. So what this means overall is that this was described as a first step towards one single scheme for both small and large companies. And what this does, it means that the overall tax benefit from RDEC and SME claims is vaguely similar now, so within a few percentage points, rather than it being nearly 3 times as much for the highest rate of relief for an SME versus RDEC. Because there was a bit of an outcry about this, at the spring budgets, the government then announced that there's this additional relief for what they're calling R&D intensive SMEs. So the enhancement rate still going down to 86% for those companies, but they're bringing back the 14.5% tax credit rate. So it brings back a wee bit of the relief for those companies. So for that's companies who are doing more than 40% of their spending, their revenue spending is on R&D. The legislation for that isn't in place yet, though, so you can't actually claim that additional relief yet. That's supposed to come in over the summer. I'm just saying that because someone asked me about it this morning. So that's upcoming. So that's all of that applies to expenditure incurred on or after 1st of April 2023. So claims that straddle that period, the initial spending will be at one rate, and the spending after the 1st of April will be at the other rate. So that is it's live now. Any claims for claim periods ending at the moment will be hit by that change. Other sort of smaller but still quite significant changes are pure mathematics is now an allowable area of science and technology to be doing R&D in to be able to claim. That's just plugging a small gap. And the same with allowing data licenses and cloud computing services costs. So obviously up till now, the software costs have not, those are the rules around software costs allowable haven't really kept up with the way that modern businesses are run. So they're bringing that in. Those changes, just to make it more confusing, are only for claims starting on or after 1st of April 2023. So we won't see many claims for pure mathematics or with data costs in until kind of this time next year. The biggest change in terms of when it becomes live, when it's implemented, is the additional information form. So this has been talked about actually at budgets for about 1.5 years. This was expected to come in. It was announced that it was coming in at the autumn budget for claims starting on after 1st of April. They've actually brought this forward, so now it's for any claim submitted after the 1st of August. So this is a drum that we are banging really loudly because this message seems to have got missed. But the additional information form is the first time that HMRC are mandating a certain amount of information about a claim. So on one hand, it's really good. There's been lots of bad behaviour in the sector where people have just been putting a number in a CT600 with nothing to back it up, no checks, nothing like that. So this will force anyone that's preparing an R&D tax relief claim to produce project descriptions, breaking down the cost in a certain way, all that kind of thing, and then submit that digitally to HMRC. So that's coming in on the 1st of August for all claims. The claim notification form is the other form, which I think has caused some of the confusion around when the additional information form comes into force. So this is the probably most controversial change that's come in. So this is HMRC wanting first-time claimants or claimants that haven't claimed in a long time to tell HMRC of their intention to claim before they do it. So this comes in is currently live, but again, for claims starting on or after the 1st of April. So again, we won't see many companies having to do the notification for quite some time yet, but it is purely just a form that says, I'm going to be claiming R&D tax relief.
Yeah,
so,
Jen, sorry to cut across you,
No.
but it's just worth making the point that we've seen quite a lot of confusion from people about these two forms and sort of misunderstanding the difference between the two, or actually sometimes just believing there's one and it's the same thing. So just on that front, we've recently launched an ebook about the additional information form, and we've got a webinar that we ran a few weeks ago about it. So I think Susie's going to post the links up to those in the chat box. But it is just worth making that point, isn't it, that these two very different things and both need to be taken into account.
Yeah, it's been really unfortunate that HMRC have announced and launched them at a similar time, but with different dates, different claims that are affected. The guidance for the claim notification form, for example, or actually for both, is still in draft. So there's some confusion even about who needs to notify and when. So still huge confusion, but basically claim notification form isn't going to affect many claims. It's only for first-time claimants, so those that haven't claimed in ages. The additional information form is coming in sooner on the 1st of August, and it's for every single claim that goes to HMRC. So hopefully we can continue to unpick that confusion for people. The other big one that got talked about a lot was taking away the ability to claim for overseas expenditure in claims. So that was supposed to come in April, but has actually now been pushed and will come into force on the 1st of April 2024. So no claims from this year will be affected by that. The reason they pushed it, again, is this, because they're investigating bringing in a single scheme. The rules around subcontracted expenditure especially are going to have to change massively. So they didn't want to bring in this set of rules and then potentially another set of rules next April. So we'll see what happens with that. So there's been all these changes, quite confusing, a lot of different announcements, different things, different ways of communicating with that, which has caused some problems. Alongside that, what we've seen since this time last year, basically, is HMRC changing their behaviour where it comes to actually policing the R&D scheme, checking for compliance, all that kind of thing. So they've taken a lot more action. They've massively increased inquiry rates. So this time last year, we saw a huge uptick in inquiry rates and a huge number of letters going out from the fraud investigation service, which is something that we'd never seen before, that didn't accuse companies of fraud, but went very close to it in terms of saying you may have claimed money you're not entitled to. They seem to have stopped doing that now, but they have talked a lot and have continued to have this higher rate of inquiry. They've done a lot of one-to-many communications where they will pick. The one that went out before Christmas, I think, was they picked SIC codes. So companies with SIC codes that weren't in technical sectors where you'd expect to find R&D, they just sent out thousands of letters to companies that have claimed from those sectors. They've done it for first-time claimants with small claims. They targeted them, I think, in January. And this seems to be something they're going to continue. We're not seeing it slowing down yet, this sort of high rate of inquiry. There's been a lot of consultations with people in the sector looking at, for example, the single scheme and how that would work. They've talked about all sorts of aspects of it. They've asked about actually people's behaviour during the scheme. They've had House of Lords committees looking at the scheme and the level of fraud and problems with it. The other thing that has changed behavior-wise from HMRC is their attitude during inquiries. So they're much less pragmatic in the way that they're dealing with it. In my 10 years of working in R&D up to last summer, I had seen one claim ever fully rejected. We're now seeing that. I mean, I think at least 50% of the inquiries that I've heard of have had at least one full rejection. Actually, they might have been able to argue it back and get it accepted after that, but they're much, much quicker to reject claims as well, just completely outright. So they are coming under pressure from the government, from the House of Lords, from lots of different areas to reduce the level of error and fraud, make sure and police it better, ensure better compliance. So they've made huge changes to the way that they're dealing with it as well.
Just to put some numbers on that, Jen, those nudge letters that you mentioned, I think just before the end of the last financial year, we had a look at some of the stats around that, and there was something like 8,000 or 9,000 letters had gone out in the previous 5 or 6 months or so. And if you think about it, that's about 20% of the throughput of claims in that period. So it's a huge number. It's nothing like the kind of interaction that HMRC would have previously had. So I guess it's important for people to recognise that they're highly likely to see this sort of communication, no matter how good a job you're doing with your clients. You're likely to see this sort of comms.
Yeah, and a lot of it is random. I mean, they're calling it a mandatory random check. I can't remember exactly the wording. So it is random to say they're going, okay, this claim is for a company with a SIC code that suggests they work in retail. Therefore, we're going to have a look at it. So it's not the kind of very, very targeted approach they had before. It is very much we don't like this one aspect of this subset of claims. We're going to look at all of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's at the moment for anyone working in R&D, you have to expect that you're going to get more inquiry letters than ever before. Up to last summer, I think the rate, and again, HMRC never publish rates of inquiry, but when you do it long enough and you do enough claims, it comes out it was about 2 to 3%. And as you say, for certain sectors, certain types of claims, it could have been up to 20% over the last year. Yeah. So it is much, much higher.
Yeah, cool. So what all that complexity has impacted us and our offering. So what's the kind of impact on our app and the changes we've had to make as a result of all of that?
We had to make our making in the middle of making.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we get the next slide, please? Thank you. So obviously we can't do much about HMRC's attitude. What we had introduced prior to this happening actually was we have a risk review that just highlights where a claim might be more at risk of getting an inquiry. So where the SIC code is non-technical, for example, we have that. We already had that in, and we offer a claim review service for companies for our clients who are a wee bit worried about a claim. We'll have a look at it and advise where they can maybe make it stronger, make sure that their wording is correct, all that kind of thing. So putting that to one side, obviously there's all these changes that are coming in terms of actually how people claim. So changes we've had to make or are currently rushing to make are in the new eligible costs. All we've had to do for that obviously is just add that in as an option. So for our customers, they can now put in the costs of cloud computing and data licenses as well as software. Pretty straightforward. And obviously adding pure maths as an area of science or technology that's allowable. Pretty easy. I'm going to leave the additional information form for now because that's the chunkier change we had to make. For the claim notification form, for now, because we don't have future developments, we'll look at kind of claim management and making sure these things are done. But for now, we're making sure at the point where somebody starts a claim that they've given that notification, simply to make sure that people aren't working on claims that they cannot now submit. You know, they haven't given a notification and it's now gone past the 6 months and they can't submit it. So we're putting in questions and making sure that people are doing that and not preparing claims that are already not going to be allowed. With the rate changes, we have made sure that we're splitting the expenditure into pre and post April to make that easy for our clients when filling in a CT 600. And we've updated everything throughout with the new enhancement rates so everyone knows what we're talking about. And then for the overseas subcontractors and EPW stuff, we had built in some checks throughout the system to make sure that only UK or exempt subcontractors have been put in. And we've just changed that, so that will come into force for any claims that are added next year. So those were the kind of easier changes. The bigger thing we're doing right now, in the hopes of getting out, we will get it out before the 1st of August, is making sure that we gather and output the data in a way that is compliant with HMRC's new form. They're asking for the data in, obviously, this is the first time they've ever mandated how the data is presented, and they're presenting it in a way that's maybe not exactly how a lot of advisors were presenting it. So we're having to do quite a lot of changes to, for example, technical details. We've had to add in questions to work out how many project descriptions are needed. So HMRC are mandating up to 10, depending on the cost of the projects and how many projects are actually included in the claim. So we need to help our clients work that out. We've updated the technical details section to make it a bit easier to fill out because there'll be more projects to do. We've had to expand some sections to ask for things like UTR, VAT and PAYE references, because again, that's something HMRC are asking for. And then the big one is splitting our costs in the way that HMRC want. So they want to see SME and RDEC totals for all projects. They also want to see all of the costs broken down into SME and RDEC overall. So these are quite different ways to present the cost. It's not just one total. They want it broken down in several different ways, which means we need to split the cost project by project. And then the last big exciting thing of this is it will allow us to produce an output that can be copy and pasted into HMRC's form. So making it a lot easier for our users to, because the form is not nice to use, really, I would say. The way that it works isn't great. And there's certain aspects of it, like if you take more than 28 days to fill out the form, it just deletes everything. So if you take too long, if your client has delays, you need extra information, you might lose everything. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for our clients to go in and fill out the form in 15, 20 minutes by just copying and pasting. So that's what we're doing to keep ahead of it. One of the main complexities is actually, as it came from the changes, is making sure that all of these come in at the right date and are applied to the right claims with the right dates and all that kind of thing. So we're confident now that no one's going to be asked about data license costs, for example, until for claims that don't start after the 1st of April, all that kind of thing. So making sure all these come in at the right time for the right claims.
It's fair to say, although devs are always busy, but they're busier on things at the moment that we hadn't anticipated, given all these changes. But anyway, yes. We'll get there. I suppose that's sort of what you've summarised there, Jen, kind of embodies our approach to all of this, trying to keep ahead of the legislation, make sure that everything we do in the software keeps our users ahead and keeps them compliant. Now, all of these changes have come about as a result of not just HMRC, but I suppose Treasury and ultimately government seeing an unusually high amount of fraud across the scheme. And that's a combination of, I suppose, fraud and let's call it deliberate bad behaviour. So I've got just another quick poll here, just to, if I can get rid of the previous poll, I'll be able to show you this. Just a second. This is now showing my incompetence with the polls. Just a second. Oh, I'm having a nightmare. There we go. I'm getting there. There we go. So second poll. Just trying to establish, again, from the audience, if you could just let us know, have you experienced or your clients experienced any bad behaviour amongst R&D service providers? Any kind of examples out there of things that you've seen that are maybe horrific? I've got a lot of people saying no, which is good. I've got a couple of people saying yes to that. Those of you who've said yes, if you don't mind putting some comments in the chat, just the kinds of things you've seen. Don't need War and Peace, but some examples would be great. We might be able to come back and have a look at that in a little while in the session. But whilst we're on that, a couple of things to say. Number one is, over the last, actually probably the last 3 years, we witnessed, not from customers of ours, I might hasten to add, but we witnessed some very fraudulent behaviour from a couple of service providers. And by fraudulent, I'm talking here about made-up companies, made-up claims, even made-up accountancy firms supporting those made-up companies. So really serious stuff. And we referred that to HMRC, who I have to say we're incredibly grateful to be told about those things. So, and any of you who do see I'm not just talking here about bad behaviour, but out and out fraud. HMRC do welcome hearing about that, and they will be grateful, and they will do something about it. But on the sort of bad behaviour side, just to kind of mention one thing that we came across recently. One of our customers sacked a client as a result of this. That client had been approached by a service provider who offered to get them, this was a children's nursery, by the way, offered to get them 50k of free government cash. No mention of R&D tax, no mention of anything, just a mechanism to get them 50k. That client said yes to it, and next thing they know, there's been an amendment to the CT return, and they did indeed get 50k back. Our customer found out about that, their accountant found out about that, as you might imagine, went ballistic with them. And it resulted in the two of them falling out and him sacking that client off. But that's the kind of thing that has been going on, people using the scheme as a mechanism to generate free cash for the unsuspecting client. So really is serious, and it is therefore well worth HMRC taking this close look at this and making the changes that they have. Have we had any examples come through there, Suze?
Yeah, we have. We've had one example of bad behaviour. Service providers who, sorry, I just lost the box there. Service providers who are very sales-led and boundary pushing, which I think is definitely something that we've stories of before. And another one, we've seen a number of reports where staff / subcon R&D percentage allocation is at 100%. Also seen a number of reports that contain waffle instead of qualifying activities.
We've had things like that kind of referred to us as well. And I think so. On the back of that, it's one thing looking at fraud and, let's say, extreme bad behaviour, deliberate bad behaviour. But Jen, given what we said earlier on about inquiry rates and nudge letters and so on, what are the sort of, let's call them legitimate reasons that a claim might end up in inquiry at the minute?
I mean, as I say, a lot of it is just random. So even legitimate claims are being pulled in because the SIC code is outdated, for example. So we have had a couple of inquiries we've seen where the company SIC code is whatever it was when it was set up 20 years ago. They've moved on. They're doing really cutting edge stuff, but they've never changed their SIC code. So they've been pulled in for an inquiry. I'm not sure that from this year, the pattern of kind of the way that the HMRC are doing it is purely on that kind of thing. So legitimate claims being pulled in is just a random. The other ones, the ones that maybe aren't as good, so these very salesy ones, these ones with high percentages, but they shouldn't have high percentages, they are being pulled in for similar reasons, but at least they're being seen and caught. And we know anecdotally that some of the providers that we know don't behave as well and aren't as compliant have had much higher rates of inquiry than legitimate ethical providers. So it is working. Yeah. But the things that HMRC would look for are, as I say, really, really generic now. So it is just that they're in a particular subset of claims.
Yeah, that makes sense. So against that backdrop of kind of complexity, bad behaviour, this is a difficult niche area of tax advice. Jenny, tell us why did you want to sort of flip into delivering an R&D tax service? What made you make that decision?
Well, two reasons really. One is, I saw a lot of revenue going to external consultants, which I thought we'd quite like in our business. And two, to provide our customers with the service that they're used to. So we've got very high levels of customer service in our business, and not all other businesses have that attitude. So there were two reasons really, and it's been a profitable arm for us.
And did you before you kind of explored the opportunity of delivering this service, is that what you had in mind? Did you see it as a potential profitable service line, or was it an experiment?
Oh gosh,
I guess you will have seen that those third parties were charging hefty fees for one thing.
Yeah, I think initially it was probably an experiment. to see how we got on with it, to see how we coped with it, because it's actually quite a scary thing when, you know, you've not, it was nothing I ever trained in. So, you know, it wasn't really around when I was training. So it was sort of one of those things that it was quite scary to offer it as a service. So we shied away from it for quite some time. And then we had one client in particular who was asking us and saying, come on, you know, we've been doing it for a couple of years using this consultant, and we'd really like to use you. We'd rather give you the money to do it. And so we went, okay, well, let's give it a go, and started looking out there to see who could support us in that. And we found WhisperClaims.
And when you were on the hunt, were you looking for a software solution, or were you just looking for a solution? So could outsourcing have been one of those solutions, for example?
No, outsourcing was never going to be one of those solutions, because the point was that the clients wanted us to do it, and we're the ones who know their business, know their costs, you know, inside out, and they're the ones who know obviously the technical side of it. I think that's one of the big things that always worried me, is sort of the technical side, because we're not. Most of our clients are in the sort of software development side of it, so we're not software developers. Despite with FreshPay, obviously, I'm quite involved in the development of it, but you know, we're not software developers. So knowing what is you know, achievable by a competent professional and what actually is a technical challenge is hard for us to be able to state. So yeah.
Okay, and in that kind of first instance, what brought you to us? How did you find us? How did you know about it?
I believe it was Simon Chaplin who mentioned
okay, so it was the mastermind group that you're a member of.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I was a member of also his sort of Facebook group, and I think it came up in one of his, I think he possibly even recommended it, with a few other people did, and I started looking, and there wasn't really anything else out there. I didn't find anything else out there who could do what you were doing. And I love the fact that, you know, you could share it with the clients, and the clients love, most of our clients, I say most of them are software developers, so they love software. So, you know, they really love being a collaborator on it. So both having the clients to be able to invite in, having a structure to be able to follow, and then creating a really nice, intelligible, sensible report that then went to HMRC, along with the structure for the costs as well. So, and I hadn't seen anything else out there that was comparable.
Excellent. And you mentioned confidence in there, as you know, having the confidence to make that brave decision to launch the service. Where did the confidence come from when you started to use us?
Well, I think because you gave some really nice little bits of training and guidelines, and you know, it's like, oh, okay, so it's I mean, there are always a lot of complications with it, but it's not actually as complicated as I was, you know, believing it was. But the fact that you structure everything and then produce a really nice report. So I was seeing from what clients were already had from other providers with these really smart looking reports, and I'm like, well, you know, how am I going to do that? So I really love the fact that as long as we put the right information in, we get a really nice looking report out of it. And we can add in our own technical detail as well.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, you've almost hit the nail on the head in terms of why it was that we set out on this journey with WhisperClaims in the first place. I'm sure Jen will sort of reinforce this point, but you know, one of the things that we wanted to do was demystify the whole thing. So yes, it is complicated, and yes, it's hard, but how can we simplify it, and how can we provide that structure that enables people to enter the market? And as you say, you know, it's treated by a lot of the specialists, presented by a lot of the specialists as a bit of a black art. You know, you must have a PhD to be able to do this. I'm going to ask our PhD attendee here, Jen. about that. It's not strictly true, is it? It's all about getting the right information out to the client at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I suppose one of the interesting parts about, because I started at a specialist consultancy and I was hired because I've got a PhD, but much as they do tend to have scientists, engineers, all that kind of thing on payroll, I don't have a software engineering PhD, but I did do software engineering claims. So I didn't need to be an expert in the area of science and technology that we were looking at to actually be able to produce a robust claim. What advisors need to do or to have is a really in-depth knowledge of the scheme itself and how it works and what is meant by a technical baseline or a technical advance or a technical uncertainty, because your job is to go out there and talk to the client and help them understand. They're the competent professionals in this, not you. And there's a danger that when you send an engineer out to speak to an engineering company, they'll come back and just assume things about the work and what's been done. Whereas if you're going in as someone who doesn't know and you're saying, look, tell me about what you did and we'll compare it to the guidelines together and we'll work through that and we will decide what is eligible. It's a much nicer, kind of more collaborative approach where you're respecting their knowledge and you're bringing your kind of your knowledge of the scheme as a filter on that and saying, okay, from what you've said, that doesn't sound like it advanced knowledge in this area, so we'll put that project to one side, but that one from the side of it, that was really hard and you've done something no one else knew how to do, brilliant, we can put that one in. So it is about that guidance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think actually it's where I think possibly we as accountants are slightly stronger, because we're not software developers, we're not software engineers. I talk to my clients and I get them to describe what they're doing, and they give me a whole load of stuff, and I go, well, that doesn't sound like R&D to me. This is, and I explain to them what R&D is and what constitutes R&D. And sometimes they go out and go, oh, actually, no, in fact, in that case, we can't claim for this project, or we can't claim for this part of the project. They're under the belief that they can claim for everything on every project because it's all R&D to them. But I think as a layperson, in terms of the software engineering side of it, I say to them, well, look, if I don't believe this is R&D, then HMRC aren't going to believe it because they're not software engineers or developers themselves either. So I actually get them to it is very collaborative. We talk about it and I get them to either reword or remove some of their parts of the claim, in order to make sure that, if I can understand it as R&D, then HMRC are going to.
Yeah,
that's sort of where I come from with them.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That's exactly what we want from our users. So that's perfect. Thanks for breaking that down, Jenny. Suze, can you just go back to, I think it was slide 5, and just given all of these changes and this kind of stronger focus from HMRC, particularly those behavioural changes on the right hand side there, Jen, have you got a feel for some of the new dynamics in the market, some of the things that are happening as a result of all of this, and the way the behaviour of service providers might be changing?
I would say not a strong feel as yet. We'll see. There's definitely change coming. One thing we are seeing is where people have realised that the additional information form is coming in for the 1st of August. There's a lot of claims going in the next couple of months so that they don't have to get into that. What we're hoping to see are probably in the end fewer claims, but much better quality claims. People actually taking more time, people realising that it's not the new PPI, if that makes sense, that this is a serious legitimate tax thing that needs to be thought about and done properly, and it's not just throwing a number in a CT 600. It's not just going, oh, you work in software development, you must have some R&D, let's take a certain proportion of your revenue or your costs as R&D. So I'm hoping we'll see changes, and I'm hoping we'll see better behavior. There's definitely changes coming already, and we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I guess one thing we've observed is, service providers backing away from the market. So maybe some of the dodgier ones are pulling away. And certainly, the squeeze on the rates is causing some service providers to pull away as well. Might not be pull out of the market completely, but pull away from certain segments at maybe smaller claims.
It's
So I
been a
guess-
wee bit unfortunate in some ways that definitely we've heard of some of the dodgier ends pulling out, which is exactly what we want to see, is, you know, these non-legitimate providers moving away. We are, however, seeing some of actually really good providers, really ethical, above board, doing everything right, thinking of moving out of it because it's got, you know, as you say, the rates are lower, it's harder to make, you know, cover your costs in doing this. And what we've been saying to them is you've got to keep going because your clients need you. You've got to find a way to work through this. You know, it is going to settle down, it is going to get better. And what we don't want to see is good providers pulling out the market and the dodgy providers coming back in and soaking up all of those clients. Yeah. So it is difficult at the moment, but it is going to get better. It has to get better. If nothing else, HMRC don't have the capacity to keep going at this rate for that much longer. So it will settle down. All of these changes will settle down once HMRC and the government are happy that they've done what they need to do to make it more compliant. I think we'll definitely see things getting better. And as you say, more of the dodgier end moving at the market because there's not the big margins to be made anymore. And it's a lot more work. So that, you know, you can't just throw something together and hope. You've got to have actual numbers, actual projects.
Yeah. And I was taken by what Jenny said earlier about, you know, your clients leaning on you for advice, Jenny, and expecting you to be able to do this. And I guess, you know, as the market changes and the you know, as the service providers pull away, there'll be even more of that going on, that people will expect or need their accountant to support them with this kind of work.
Yeah, I would think so. You know, because they a lot of them. So some of our clients are sort of venture capital backed startups, and they were all in these accelerator programs and incubators. And they'll chat with their peers, and they say, "Oh yeah, you can claim on R&D, and you can claim for everything you're going to get all this money back." And then they come to us, and we go, "Well, you know, actually, sorry, but you know what you're telling me, what you do there doesn't actually qualify." Or yeah, you've got some costs that are going to qualify, but you know, you're talking about by the time you've paid us to actually do that claim for you, you're probably not going to get very much back. You know, maybe you've had a year of not having very much costs, and you know, you've been sort of starting your development. So I think they really do rely on us. And, you know, otherwise they go to these providers. You know, I've had a couple of clients who've said, "Oh, you know, I've been speaking to, you know, XYZ, and they said I can claim all this money back." And I look at their accounts and go, "Well, you haven't spent anything, so you can't claim back."
That's fair.
So they really, you know, and God knows what these other providers were going to be, you know, claiming for them. When I go and look on, there's HMRC do have a list of all agents registered with them for, I think, for AML, anti-money laundering purposes. So if the consultant isn't a member of one of the professional bodies, you can actually go and look on HMRC to see if they're registered with them for AMLR. And I've found ones that aren't. They're not registered with any professional body. So you know, immediately that rings huge alarm bells to me.
Yeah, and just in and amongst what you said there, talking about eligibility, we've got another resource. Just Suze will share the links to this again. We've got a fantastic eligibility related ebook that just kind of walks people through eligible. Like examples of eligible projects by sector and so on. So that's well worth people having a look at if they're along that journey that you've just described there, Jenny. And that's a really good tip about service providers as well. So just talking about service providers. So Jenny, from your point of view, now you've had this experience of delivering this service, what would you say are the kind of key building blocks to being a good advisor? You know, if you were quite apart from utilizing WhisperClaims, of course, what would you say to somebody who's embarking on this journey? What are the kind of key things they need to have in place to be able to offer a service?
I think you do need to thoroughly understand what constitutes R&D to HMRC, because, you know, as I say, what we think of as R&D isn't necessarily what HMRC think of as what HMRC allowed to qualify as R&D. And really, some really good software like WhisperClaims that help you and support you. We're members of the R&D community, which is set up by, I think, one of the WhisperClaims co-founders,
Yes.
Richard Edwards, who provide training and support as well. So I would recommend something like that to somebody who's going to start.
And all of those things, of course, count towards CPD too. So there's a kind of sideways reason for keeping hold of these things, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so in terms of our service and how we built this, we've sort of covered why is it, why did we do it, and everything that you've talked about, Jenny, kind of plays to the reasons we built this software in the first place. So just then focusing on value. So what would you say is the kind of value that you've brought to your customer base, and what value has it brought to your firm as well in delivering this service?
I mean, in terms of monetary value, I think we've got 12 clients with, I think the last year we've had 12 clients with an average eligible spend of about 312,000. So tax benefit per client average of 75,000. And it works out, I mean, in terms of us, it's about 10% of our turnover.
Oh, is it? It's as significant as that? So,
yeah,
so that's the different. That's the step change it made in entering this market.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's it makes us profitable, as opposed to we're doing all right. we're getting by. Yeah. It gives us profitability. I mean, it takes my time up a lot. So I sort of think of it as my job is R&D, and the team support me on it, but it's me who does the majority of the work and does that work. But yeah, makes us profitable.
And I guess I was going to say a side benefit. Actually, it's probably a core benefit of doing it. Is that by doing this work, you must have a much closer working relationship with those customers than you otherwise would, because you're having a much deeper conversation with them than you otherwise would have done.
Yeah, we're really understanding their business. So, a lot of the time we just get on and do all the finances and don't necessarily actually understand what they do in their business. And I find it really fascinating actually getting really into those conversations with their dev team and finding out. I mean, it's fascinating. Sometimes some of this stuff that they're doing is great, and there's so many clever people out there, and I'm very lucky that a lot of our clients are some of these really clever people. I'm always a bit in awe of them, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I guess they'll also appreciate the fact that you're spending that time and getting so close to them. I'm imagining that will have taken them a million miles away from the service providers they might have been using before.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, probably.
Excellent. All right. We just skip on a couple of slides, Suze. So this is kind of back to you, Jen, just to kind of remind us on the back of all of those changes and everything we've talked about with Jenny. What do you think HMRC are going to be looking for in this next period?
I think they're going to be looking for people to be keeping in line with all the changes. I don't think they're going to be particularly sympathetic if people miss this. So, but in more detail, they definitely want to see claims coming from more technical sectors. So one of the first questions when you start filling out the additional information form is, what's the SIC code of the company? So they're absolutely trying to stop, as you say, like the example there of children's nurseries. We've seen claims for takeaway restaurants, hairdressers, this kind of thing. They're wanting to stop those, and this obviously asking for that upfront means they can target those very, very easily. So obviously our advice to anyone going into this is check SIC codes before you submit claims. Quite often the SIC code is completely out of date. Obviously they're looking for the additional information form. It's a big thing. Obviously the claim notification, but I'm talking about that less because that isn't hugely relevant to people right now doing claims compared to the additional information form. So as I say, it's the first time they've mandated additional information about a claim. So this is a absolute complete massive change from the way HMRC are doing it. I'm fascinated to see how HMRC actually process this when they come to start doing it in earnest in August, but we'll see. And within that, the major change is these detailed project descriptions and the fact there's going to be more of them. So as I say, it's up to 10. And I know that back when I did this as a consultant, we didn't tend to describe that many because it was the feeling that HMRC don't want to read 10 projects, so you don't want to write 10 projects. Whereas now that's what they're mandating is it's any. Sorry,
guys.
It's okay. So yes, there are more project descriptions, more detailed project descriptions. As I say, they'll be looking for pre-notification for as the claims from this year get to the end of their financial year. And they're looking for all of the changes to be played, right claims at the right time. So just keeping up with all of this is actually going to be quite a lot of work for users over the next year or two, especially if HMRC go through with or the government goes through with what they've talked about and merging the schemes in April next year. So there's still changes to come. So it's keeping an eye on all of that, just doing what you're told when you're told to do it for the right claims, I think is really what HMRC are going to be looking for this year.
Yeah. So no surprise I'm going to say this, every reason to use WhisperClaims to keep ahead of all of that and have the right structures in place and keep ahead of HMRC's expectations. So with that in mind, I guess why not do what Jenny did, which is have a demo of WhisperClaims and have more of a look at us and give it a try. So back to you, Suze, in terms of how to do that.
Yeah, sorry everyone for that little glitch, and apologies, Jen. I think there's an issue with one of our download links. I was just trying to fix that and didn't realise it was going to pull the slides down. So sorry everyone. I will try and look at that as soon as we come off the call today, everybody, and we'll make sure that that link is included in the recording that leads us nicely into. We will be sending out a recording of today's session to anybody. If you had to leave early or you missed the start or whatever the reason is, you'll be able to watch back. And as Mike just said there, if you are keen to find out more about WhisperClaims and our software and advice line support, we've got a couple of options for you. You can either join our app showcase demonstration on the 13th of June, which will start at 12:30. I'm just posting a link to that webinar in the chat box now. Or if you'd like to have a deeper one-to-one chat and a one-to-one demo, please feel free to check out the meeting link that I've just posted in the chat box too, or you can email me directly and we'll get that organised and booked in. Everything should be there in the chat box for you. And again, apologies about that one duff link. I will sort that out later on. That is us coming to an end, I think, there, Mike, and ready for some questions.
Yeah, perfect timing. Not by design, but by chance. We're on time, so that's good.
Yep. So we've got one question in. Who should be responsible for submitting the additional information form, the R&D tax consultant or the accountant?
I can take this one. Technically speaking, either could do it. In the resources Suze has linked to, we've got a list of things you need to do to be ready for the additional information form. One of those is registering for an agent services account with HMRC. So if you don't have that, you can't submit the form on behalf of someone else. So I know there'll be a lot of consultants who, if they want to submit the claim, the form will need to get themselves sorted out with the right kind of access from HMRC. In terms of who should be, it's a really good question. It's something we've been kind of bouncing around because it needs to be coordinated with a submission of the CT 600. So the additional information form has to be submitted to HMRC before the CT 600 goes in. So if you're a consultant working with an accountant, you're going to have to work more closely with those accountants now to make sure you're coordinating who's doing which form, when, and making sure that that all works out. Both names have to go in the form anyway. So if a client has used an R&D tax consultant to do this, then the form asks for the name of the tax agent, so the accountant, the name of the R&D agent, and then a name of someone at the company who's responsible for the claim. So it's got to be a coordinated effort. To my mind, thinking about the way that consultants work with accountants, it's probably better the accountant does it because it's probably better to do the submission as a whole. But I'm not sure you've got an opinion on this, Jenny. I know you don't like to submit other people's claims anyway.
No, I don't particularly. I mean, I probably would if it was a reputable R&D consultant, but in that case, why aren't they using us instead? But I think as the accountant, I think obviously they'd have to charge for their time, and they get, you know, to do that. And the customer would be saying, well, I'm already paying X amount to the consultant. Why am I paying you for your time too? So I think it would have to be probably a discussion between the consultant and the accountant. Maybe the consultant is the one who pays the accountant to do it, if the accountant has to be the one to do it.
Yeah, I think ever since the sort of rise of consultants in this market, it's been a point of tension. The expectation that an accountant will do the submission for free when the consultant's the one that's getting the fee. So I think this is going to increase that tension. And so it's going to have to be an open discussion, as you say, between the consultant and the accountant about who's going to do it, who's being paid for it, when it's going to happen, and all that kind of thing. So it will add complexity to that submission process where it's being done by a consultant.
Great. I've got another question here. What's meant by someone responsible for the claim? Could this be the managing director?
So it has to be a senior officer of the company. So it's got to be someone who, you know, company's house director level. So as long as they are a director according to company's house, then yes, managing director. As long as they're senior officer of the company, that would count. So you can't have the tech lead on the projects being the name in the form. That won't work. It has to be someone who'd be responsible for the account, responsible for the claim itself.
Okay. Don't be shy, everyone. Please do fire over your questions if you've got any. We've got an expert panel here ready to take them. I do have one that's actually come in out with the Q&A box. Just checking, am I right to mention the other software provider, or should I keep that one?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the question has come in saying, is it likely that 1, HMRC, and 2, our software provider, which is CCH, will cope with the new form? This is the new additional information form, and processing of claims from the 1st of August 2023 onwards. CCH has said that they will include it in their update due by the end of June 2023, but are they not dependent on HMRC doing their bit first?
I think just cut in there, Jen, see if you've got the same opinion. Two different things going on there in that question for me. One is the additional information form itself is submitted via HMRC's portal. It won't be submitted by any third-party software because there isn't an open interface. So assuming that you've done that within the third-party software, whether that's CCH or Iris or whatever else, there'll be a tick box associated with the CT600 submission to say that you've already done that additional information form. So there's kind of two paths here. There'll always be the direct submission to HMRC of the form, but then you'll need to acknowledge that you've done that form within that third-party software. That's right, isn't it, Jen? Yeah.
So HMRC's form is actually up and live and could be used right now if you want to. Don't have to, but it is there. I'd encourage anyone who is likely to be submitting claims come August actually goes and does a few dummy claims. I haven't submitted one, but I've run several dummy claims through just to have a play and to see how it works, get used to it. So HMRC have actually done their bit so far. I think this question probably comes from the slight debacle of the CT600L. Was it last year before, where a lot of the accounting software providers weren't ready on time for that because HMRC released it so late. This is a bit different because HMRC have done their bit, so I would hope that someone like CCH will have it ready. It is just, as Mike says, one more box in the CT600 to tick to say that you've submitted the additional information form. So fingers crossed, it should be smoother than previous launches of something like this, but we'll have to see.
I think that's it. Everybody's been very quiet today. But
there are a couple more questions there, Suze. I don't know if you can't see them. Do you want me to read them out? Because I can see two more.
Oh, yeah, I had them as answered already. Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, so, oh no, the one about who should be responsible. No, I don't have them. Sorry, Jen.
Okay, that's okay. We've got one that says, what are the benefits and/or risks from submitting a request for advanced clearance? So I think that's advance assurance, I would assume. I personally have never been a huge fan of advance assurance. You're doing a huge amount of work up front to get HMRC to agree that what your client's doing is R&D. And then if they change what they do at any point in that 3 years, the advance assurance isn't valid anyway. And you do have to, I'm assuming, I haven't looked at the interfaces, but you'd still have to fill out an additional information form every year and put the claim in anyway. So much as there are benefits in that you've got HMRC has kind of approved your work and you're unlikely to get an inquiry, it only counts if your client continues to do the same kind of R&D for those 3 years and does exactly what they said they do, which, speaking as someone who worked as a startup, is still working at a startup, the chances of you getting to 3 years still doing what you said is quite slim. So that's why I've always been a little bit, you could do the work now, or you could just do it at the time, and it almost amounts to the same thing. Shall I read out the last one as well?
Sorry, Jen, I don't have the other one either.
That's
sorry.
okay. In your experience, are current HMRC staff strikes affecting processing times of claims? Have you seen any difference, Jenny?
Ask me in about 2 weeks. I've got a couple that are just coming up to their, I mean, my experience, it takes about 6 weeks anyway. So they say 30 days, I think. But I wait till about 6 weeks before I start beginning to worry. And usually 5 to 6 weeks, but I've got a couple that are due to be, they're coming up to that deadline within the next 2 weeks. So far this year, no, but you know, with HMRC, anything can change, can't it?
I suspect in reality, all of the things that we talked about earlier on in the session, you know, the kind of increased scrutiny, drafting in inspectors from elsewhere in HMRC, those things are probably having a bigger effect, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it's not going to help, is it, if we're on strike? But I suspect those other things are the things that are really impacting on time.
Yeah, and general incompetence. I've got one customer with an outstanding inquiry at the moment, and we responded to all of their demands, which was all duplicated because 90% of it was already in the report. They just wanted it in their own, I guess, their own answer structure, and we responded to it all on time. And then about a month later, my customer chased it up, and they went, "Oh no, we've lost the email. We closed we closed it and rejected it because you didn't reply." But we did. "Oh yeah, no, we found it now." So I mean, it's just HMRC, right?
The usual, more of the same.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, I think we're done on questions, Suze.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for staying. We've run over ever so slightly, so we're really grateful that you stayed. As with anything, if anybody does have any questions downstream or anything comes to mind, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can email me directly in the suze@whisperclaims.co.uk, and I will certainly pass those on to the most appropriate person. Thank you again for joining us today. Remember, there will be a recording sent out in the next few days. And thank you so much to Jenny for your time today. We really appreciate you joining us. See you all very soon.